Hello everyone and welcome to the part 2 of the Unit 1 review. So just to look at supply and demand again, concepts that are going to come up a lot on the AP test. Law of demand states that there's an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. Essentially this means that as the price of a good goes up, people are going to buy fewer and fewer of it, and as the price goes down, people are going to buy more of it. And that's why our demand curve is downward sloping. That at a high price, our quantity demanded is going to be low, but at a lower price, our quantity demanded is going to be high. So price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. Price goes down, quantity demanded goes up. If we're looking at what can shift this demand curve, right, make the entire curve move, let's remember that we use this acronym BIDER. Right, we're looking at the number of buyers, how many people are in the market. As Brunswick's population's grown, the demand for houses and cars and food's all grown. People's income, if you're making more money, your demand for goods increases. You're willing to buy more at the same price. And if your income decreases, you're buying less. Taste is how much we like or want or need a product. If it comes with cool new features and trinkets and doodads, our demand's going to increase. Expectations for the future. I bought a generator in the middle of summer last year with the expectation that, okay, if we have another nasty hurricane season, I might need this over the upcoming months. I didn't need it when I bought it, but I expected that there was a possibility I would need it, later on in the year. And then finally, the prices of related goods. This goes back to our substitute goods and our complementary goods. Substitutes we're buying in place of one another. Complementary goods we're buying together. So if the price of McDonald's goes up, and our quantity demanded goes down for McDonald's, but our quantity demanded for Burger King goes up, they'd be substitute goods for one another. You're buying less of one, you're buying more of the other. Complementary goods, if the price of McDonald's fries go down, then your demand for their burgers would go up, right? Because the whole meal is cheaper, you're more likely to buy the burgers and fries together, they'd be complementary goods. The law of supply tells us the opposite. The relationship between price and quantity supplied is direct positive. If we're looking at our supply and demand curve, price and quantity, that as the price of a good goes up, businesses are going to be willing to supply more and more of that product, right? So it's upward sloping because if price goes up, quantity supplied goes up, price goes down, businesses are going to produce less of that good. Now, if we're looking at what can shift the supply curve, it's looking at anything that's going to affect our ability to produce. And we use this acronym TONERS. We're looking at technology, other goods. So if we're looking at better AI technology, that's going to affect our ability to supply all kinds of goods. The number of sellers. Since Brunswick's been growing, we have more pizza restaurants, which means our supply of pizza has increased. But we have a lot fewer frozen yogurt places than we did before, so our supply of frozen yogurts is decreasing. Expectations for the future for supply is more about what we expect to happen with the economy. If I think our economy is going to collapse next year, I'm not likely going to supply a lot of houses right now. If I think our economy is going to do really well next year, maybe I do open up a new business and I produce more goods. The R would be resource costs. So if I have a pizza restaurant and the tomatoes get cheaper, that's going to increase my ability to make pizza. I can make more pizza at the same cost or the same price. And the S for toners would be the subsidies and taxes. So if the government is trying to encourage the production of something, they'll subsidize it. The government will give extra money to the business to make it cheaper for them to produce that good. Or if they're trying to discourage the production of it, they'll tax it. Like with cigarettes or alcohol, they add that per unit sales tax onto it, or production tax onto it to make it more difficult to produce the good. All right, now graph 1 and 2. Draw a shortage on graph 1. Okay, so we've got our supply curve, we've got our demand curve, price, quantity. We need to make sure to ace our graphs. We've got our equilibrium price, PE. We've got our equilibrium quantity, QE. So it's asking us to draw, or I guess P1 is what it's asking us to label. And we've got our quantity supplied and quantity demanded here, QS, QD. All right, so now if we're drawing out a shortage here, then that means that demand, let's say that we set our price right here. I'm going to call this P2. That our demand is greater than our supply. So I've got QD, I'll call QD1 here, and QS1. So at this price, we would be experiencing a shortage because our demand is greater than our supply. If we're looking at graph number 2, got supply, demand, price, QE. So we've got our axes labeled, we've got our curves labeled, we've got our equilibrium labeled. I draw surplus on graph 2. So let's say that we set our price up here. I'm going to label this P2. So in this case, at this higher price, our quantity demanded is going to be low, QD. Our quantity supplied at that price is going to be high. Businesses are more likely to produce it at that higher price. So that would be QS. So here we have a surplus of a good. We're supplying more than the demand. So the distance between those would be our surplus. So if market forces begin to return to graph number 2 to equilibrium, the quantity demanded will blank and the quantity supplied will blank. So in order to get us back to equilibrium, the price of this good is going to have to come down. Right? And if that happens, our quantity demanded will go up if the price goes down. If our price goes down, our quantity supplied will decrease because businesses are making less of a profit. All right, looking over at 1.6, change in blank does not shift the demand curve or the supply curve. Instead it moves. So a change in price isn't changing our supply or our demand. It doesn't affect our ability to make the good, and it doesn't change how much we like the good. So let's look at an example here. So we've got supply, we've got demand, we've got our equilibrium price, PE, we've got our equilibrium quantity, QE. So let's say that we're looking at this good costing $1, $2, $3. So if I change the price from $1 to $2 or $2 to $3, it's not shifting our curve. The curve just represents the different prices and how much are getting purchased. So it would move us along the curve, $1, $2, $3. A change in price isn't going to shift the curve, but a change in anything else will. So this one's asking to draw a demand increase. So let's remember Erdl the turtle. If our demand is increasing, that curve is going to shift to the right. And the reasoning for that is because now our quantity at each price is higher. All right, the second one is looking at a demand decrease. So our demand curve would shift to the left because, again, we're always measuring from low to high. So the further to the left we go, the lower of a demand or the lower of a supply we're looking at. All right, we've got demand and supply. Draw a supply increase. Our supply is shifting to the right because now we're producing more at each price. And then a supply decrease, got supply, got demand. My supply curve would shift to the left because I'm producing less at each price then. Now the double shifter rule, let's remember that if both curves shift, either the price or quantity will be indeterminate. And that doesn't mean that it didn't move. It moved twice. Indeterminate. It just means that without the specific data, we can't determine whether it increased or decreased. So what I mean by that is if we look at supply and we look at demand here, we've got our equilibrium price, we've got our equilibrium quantity. All right, draw an increase in demand and an increase in supply. Our demand increases, D2. Our supply increases, S2. Now what we see here is that our quantity increased twice. Demand went up, quantity went up. Supply increased, quantity increased. So the quantity for sure went up. But if we're looking at price, when demand increased, price went up. When the supply increased, price went back down. So it would be indeterminate, right? We can't determine whether it increased or decreased. It's about where it was before, maybe a little bit higher, maybe a little bit lower. Can't really tell without the raw data. For each of the scenario, identify the initial change in demand or supply, price and quantity of electric cars. So if there's an increase in the price of gas-powered cars, a substitute for electric cars. All right, so again, let's just draw out a little supply and demand curve for each of these. So if there's an increase in the price of gas-powered cars, and that's a substitute for electric cars. And electric cars are the product that we're looking at here. So if the gas-powered cars are more expensive, it doesn't change our ability to make the electric cars, but it does change the likelihood people buy them. our demand is going to increase, which is going to lead to higher prices. And if we're looking at the quantity is going to increase because we're measuring from low to high. So when in doubt, graph it out. All right, let's look at this next one. Supply, demand, the effect on car manufacturers from a significant increase in the price of labor. If I've got to pay my workers more, it makes it more difficult to supply the good. The supply drops. If that happens, our price levels have gone up. The quantity supplied is going to decrease. A decrease in the global income discourages foreigners from purchasing electric cars. All right, so in this case, it looks like the demand for these electric vehicles is going down. Draw a little supply and demand curve here. All right, demand for the good is going down, which means lower prices and lower quantity. So our equilibrium price has gone down, our equilibrium quantity has decreased as well. A decrease in the price of robotic technology used to produce electric cars. If you see this word produce, we should be thinking supply, right? So it's becoming easier to produce this good. Our supply is going up. Supply, demand, supply is going up, which leads to lower prices and higher quantity. So lower prices and quantity, we're producing more. And finally, the government prevents the price of electric cars from increasing. There's a price ceiling. So if we're preventing it from getting the equilibrium price, the price is going to be lower than it was before. Let's take a look at this one. Supply, demand, equilibrium. All right, so if we're looking at a binding price ceiling, so it should say binding there, we're setting the price lower than it should be. In that case, the demand will be high, but the business is going to produce less than they were before because they're not making a bigger profit. So the quantity is going down because they're not willing to produce as much as they could before. The supply and demand curves aren't shifting because we're just changing the price. A change in price just moves us along the curve. All right, final piece of this is kind of calculating it using some math, right? Calculate the amount of the shortage when the price is $8. So if we're at $8, our quantity demanded is 70 units. At $8, our quantity supplied is 30 units. So 30 people want it, 70 people want it, 30 of them are available. We're going to have a shortage of 40 units. All right, if we're looking at the price of $11, we're going to run a surplus. Quantity supplied is greater than quantity demanded. Our quantity supplied is 60 units. Quantity demanded is 40 units. And so that would be a surplus of 20 units. Identify a specific scenario that would cause the equilibrium price to increase and the equilibrium quantity to decrease. All right, so we're looking at the price to go up and the quantity to go down. So what we would see that's later on we'll get into this idea of stagflation. But if our supply of the good decreases, that would lead to higher prices than before, and that would lead to a lower quantity than before. So if supply goes down, then that leads to higher prices and lower quantity. Identify a specific scenario that would cause the equilibrium price and quantity to decrease. All right, for there, if we see our demand curve shift to the left, right, that would lead to a lower equilibrium price and a lower equilibrium quantity as well. Explain the difference between a change in demand and a change in quantity demanded. So we just changed our demand. This demand curve shifted to the left. We're buying less at each price level. If it's changing the demand, it's changing the entire curve. If we're looking at a change in price, that would be our quantity demanded, right? If I would have raised my price from $10 to $12 or 12 to 15 or lowered it from 15 to 8, that would just move us along the curve. It would change the quantity that's demanded. So a change in demand is going to affect how much we like or want or need a product. A change in quantity demanded is going to change a specific price, and we'll look at how much of that good is being purchased now. All right, see you guys in Unit 2. Hope you all are doing well.